The Galactic High Court had witnessed many spectacles in its 3,000-year history. Fleet admirals had thundered threats that shook the crystalline walls. Warlords had brandished weapons that could crack planets. Diplomatic corps had presented evidence of genocides that made even the most hardened judges weep acidic tears. But never had the court fallen into such absolute, breathless silence as it did when the human opened her mouth to sing. Ambassador Lyra Chen stood barely 5.5 feet tall, dwarfed by the towering aliens that surrounded her. The Velkari delegation loomed 12 feet above the courtroom floor, their chitinous exoskeletons gleaming like obsidian armor. The crystalline Nexari judges refracted light in prismatic cascades, their voices usually harmonizing in mathematical perfection. Even the diminutive Keth representatives, though only 4 feet tall, carried themselves with the authority of beings who had conquered half the outer rim. Against them all, Lyra looked impossibly fragile. "The defendant will now present their final statement," announced High Judge Zeeth Ka, her crystalline form pulsing with cold blue light. "The court recognizes the human delegation." Commander Theklar of the Velkari leaned forward in his seat, mandibles clicking with anticipation. For 6 months, his people had presented irrefutable evidence of humanity's aggressive expansion into Velkari territory. The humans had established colonies on 17 worlds that the Velkari claimed as ancestral hunting grounds. According to Galactic Law Section 47.3, the punishment was clear: complete withdrawal from the disputed systems and a century of indentured servitude to the injured party. The human fleet waited just beyond the system's edge, 47 ships against the Velkari's 300. If diplomacy failed, the war would be brief and decisive. Lyra stepped forward, her simple gray suit a stark contrast to the elaborate ceremonial armor and bioluminescent displays around her. She carried no datapad, no holographic evidence, no quantum-encrypted testimonials. She carried only herself. "Honored judges," she began, her voice clear but unremarkable. "My species has always believed that some truths cannot be spoken. They must be sung." High Judge Zeeth Ka's prismatic form flickered with confusion. "Ambassador Chen, this court recognizes only factual evidence and legal precedent. If you wish to present—" "Please," Lyra interrupted, the word carrying a weight that made the vast chamber seem suddenly intimate. "Let me sing you the song of Terra's children." Before anyone could object, she began. The first note emerged like a whisper, so soft that the court's advanced audio systems strained to capture it. But it grew, rising from somewhere deep in the human's chest, carrying with it something none of the aliens had ever experienced before. It was not the mathematical precision of Nexari vocal harmonics or the ultrasonic authority of Velkari battle calls. It was something far more primitive, far more dangerous. It was the sound of a species that had learned to find beauty in the darkness between stars. Lyra sang without words, her voice weaving through melodies that seemed to capture the very essence of humanity's journey. The other delegates heard the whisper of solar winds across ancient Earth. They felt the desperate hope of generation ships launching into the unknown. They experienced the joy of first contact, the grief of worlds lost to cosmic disasters, the stubborn refusal to surrender that had carried humanity across impossible distances. Commander Theklar found his mandibles trembling. In the human's voice, he heard something his warrior species had never known: the courage of beings who were not built for the void but who had claimed it anyway. These humans had not evolved claws or carapaces or natural weapons. They had only their fragile flesh and their inexplicable refusal to accept limitations. The Nexari judges began to resonate in sympathy, their crystalline forms pulsing in rhythm with Lyra's melody. They had spent millennia calculating the mathematical probabilities of interspecies harmony. But this human was creating it through pure instinct, weaving their rigid frequencies into something they had never imagined possible. As her voice soared higher, Lyra sang of the 17 disputed worlds. But she did not sing of conquest or colonization. She sang of children taking their first steps on alien soil, of farmers coaxing life from barren ground, of poets writing verses beneath unfamiliar constellations. She sang of hope taking root in the darkness. The Keth delegation, masters of psychological warfare, found their mental defenses crumbling. They had expected legal arguments, military threats, or diplomatic maneuvering. They had not expected this raw, unfiltered glimpse into the human spirit. These beings did not expand because they were conquerors. They expanded because expansion was their song, written into their very DNA. When Lyra's voice finally faded, the silence that followed was absolute. It stretched for long moments, broken only by the soft hum of life support systems. High Judge Zeethka spoke first, her crystalline form dim with wonder. "Ambassador Chen," she said quietly, "in 3,000 years of jurisprudence, this court has never heard such evidence." Commander Thekla rose slowly from his seat. His massive form cast shadows across the chamber, but when he spoke, his voice carried none of its earlier aggression. "The Felkari delegation withdraws its claim." He paused, his compound eyes fixed on the small human below. "Those worlds, they were never truly ours. We merely hunted there. But you have made them sing." The other delegations murmured their agreement. How could they demand the silencing of a species whose very existence was music? As the court dissolved into recess, delegates from a dozen species approached Lyra, asking questions she could not answer. How had she done it? What technology had she used? What was the theoretical framework behind her technique? She only smiled, still catching her breath. It wasn't technology, she told them. It was just human. Later, as news of the court's decision spread across the galaxy, military strategists would puzzle over the implications. The human fleet had never fired a shot, yet had achieved total victory. Some theorized about new forms of psychological warfare. Others spoke of unknown human technologies that could manipulate emotion. They were all wrong. What had shaken the Galactic High Court more than any fleet could was something far simpler and far more terrifying. The recognition that among all the species that had claimed the stars, only humanity had learned to transform their struggles into song. And in that song, the galaxy heard something it had never known it was missing. The sound of beauty born from defiance, of hope carved from hardship, of a species that refused to let the vast indifference of space silence their voice. The human fleet departed peacefully, carrying with them 17 worlds and something far more precious, the knowledge that sometimes the greatest victories come not from the strength of one's weapons, but from the courage to bare one's soul.